the quorum, so we can start. So welcome everybody. Sorry I couldn't be there with you in person. After 2.5 years, COVID finally caught me. But feeling better, but probably still contagious. So we can start the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from last month's meeting? So we can start. So welcome everybody.
Go back in time. Motion. We have a motion.
Motion to approve August 22 minutes.
That was Jarrett.
Yes, that was Jarrett.
Sorry, thank you. This is going to be a challenge with I thought it was hard being in the room and having people in both places last time, but it's harder being remote and having people in 2 places. So Jarrett proposed a motion to approve last month's minutes. Do we have a second?
I'll second it, Sherry.
Thank you, Sherry. Are there any edits or changes that anyone wants to make to the minutes before they're approved?
You have to press the turn the mic on.
I'm sorry.
All right, hearing no changes. Are there any opposed? Otherwise, the motion is approved. All right, the minutes are passed. Thank you. Moving on, our next agenda item, we have room for public comment. Do we have anyone either in the room there or anyone on the line that would like to provide public comment? Going once, going twice. No public comment. All right. So we'll jump right into our first information item. We've got Jason Lawrence and John Lewis to talk about the CTC redevelopment and update on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to start off with a little bit of an introduction on the issue, and then I'll turn it over to Jason to delve a little deeper into the issue. But before I get started, just on, if I can ask for a moment of personal privilege, it is my understanding that one of your TSAC board members, this will be their last meeting. Am I correct in that, Sherry? All right. Well, on behalf of CATS, the City of Charlotte, and all of us here, I'd like to really thank you for your service on the committee. I didn't want that opportunity to go by without saying thank you. Good luck on your next chapter in life. I'm sure we will, at some point find someone to fill that seat, but you'll be back and forth, even better. So thank you. But Madam Chair, back to the agenda. The Charlotte Transportation Center has been on our radar screen from a capital investment grant program for the last several years. Normally under investments made with federal funding, they have what is called a useful life. As an example, for our transit buses, we are allowed to keep those vehicles, if using federal funding, 13 years or 500,000 miles, whichever comes first. For a special transportation service vehicle, that's 5 years. For a building, it's 30 years. And the Charlotte Transit Center, which opened in 1995, believe it or not, is reaching a point where it will have reached its useful life. In 2025, it will be that 30-year life cycle. That doesn't mean we have to end the utilization, but then it becomes a situation of, do we renovate or do we start all over again? And we've been looking at this issue over the last couple of years. I think what really brought the issue to the forefront was our preparation for the Republican National Convention. Did not happen because of COVID, but the planning for that really began a year to almost 18 months ahead of time. And once we found out that the expectations from a security standpoint that the transit center would need to be closed during the convention, we started looking around for locations that we could build a temporary or operate a temporary transit center. And through months and months of searching and conversations with property owners, there really was no piece of property big enough to handle our transit movements anywhere within the 277 loop. And so that really, it would have been a problem for that week, but it really heightened the importance of focusing in on what our future options were for the Charlotte Transit Center. We then received an unsolicited proposal that really had us thinking differently about this issue. Typically when we receive unsolicited proposals, they have to be for an issue or an service or a commodity that is not normal to our day-to-day operations. As an example, we would not entertain an unsolicited proposal for paper clips, pencils, or oil filters. Those are things that we get normally on the market, and there really isn't anything that someone could bring outside of the box other than price on those commodities or those services. But in terms of real estate, it really became interesting when the development team acquired the parking lot directly across the street from the transit center. And their proposal was for multi-use, multifaceted, transit-oriented development that would include a new transit center on the property that we are located on now, but also gave us the opportunity to operate a temporary facility immediately adjacent to it in the property they controlled across the street. We went through our normal unsolicited proposal process, which requires us to entertain competing bids. And so we did that, posted that we had received this proposal and asked if there were any competing interests that would like to offer competing proposals. We received 3. We evaluated that and chose to move forward with this option. Now, that is only to begin negotiations and start the preliminary planning. No final decisions have been made. We're still working through that process. But now that we're in the preliminary planning, we need to take a look at what are the viable options and alternatives for a new transit center on this location. There's been a lot of press coverage on this, but I think one of the things that we want to start with, and I think, I hope that, and I believe that the members of this committee will agree, is that the current transit center has outlived its usefulness from an operations standpoint, not just a federal standpoint. There are numerous issues with the current transit center in terms of operations, in terms of rehab and rehabilitation of the center, the amount of funding it would take to bring it back up, and then what do we do with intervening operations? So with that, we thought it was important to start the conversation with the development team about what our options would look like if we move forward with this proposal. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jason. Jason will give a little more in-depth history on the transit center and then talk a little bit about our options moving forward. Jason.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Thank you, Madam Chair and the committee. You know, we have brought this to you a few times before to kind of give you some context. I think what we want to do today is really just give some perspective about what is, you know, thinking through a new transit hub for 2022 in a facility that's been there since 1995. The world has changed literally completely around that site. And what are the things that we want to talk through? What needs to be in this facility? And I think one thing we can all agree on is that the facility has not only outlived its useful life, but also it doesn't really necessarily meet the needs of a 21st century transit system. You know, think about like what we have today: Blue Line, Gold Line, micromobility, on-demand services, cell phones even. I mean, 1995, I think we still had bricks the size of cell phones. So the world has really changed a lot. And if you click here, the slide again, Brandon, you can see like really this location is truly the heart of like the uptown area, but think about the region. I mean, there are 100,000 jobs within the center city loop, but within 277. 2002, there were roughly 70,000. South End had, maybe 2,000 jobs in 2002, and today has close to 18,000. South Park has 20,000. Ballantyne has just under 25,000. The airport has over 18,000 employees. University area, URP, somewhere around 18,000 as well. So great employment hubs as well, but none match the scale and size and density of what's happening in uptown Charlotte. And that will, likely to continue over time. And think of all the residential that's here now. So the transit center really will serve as a focal point of transit activity. It does today, and it will continue into the future. Next slide. But it certainly has seen a lot over its time at that location. Panthers had their first season in 1995. Charlotte Trolley, the Lynx Blue Line, City Lynx Gold Line, the extension. I saw the Hornets over off Tyvola leave, the Bobcats came back, and then now we have Hornets again, Charlotte Knights, Charlotte Football Club. I mean, a lot has happened and changed in Uptown. It's not just an office place, it's a place of recreation for the region as well. And we see great ridership from special events. So that's something to think about as well in a multimodal facility. And just the population, in 1995, Charlotte was, just 467,000 people. Our service area for Charlotte Transit at the time was 212. We now serve, a region of over 1 million people in square miles of, 675. So much larger space that we're talking about. So there is a need to kind of also rethink what is the purpose of that facility in the context of all these modes that are coming here. Next slide. And just a couple of images of showing, the original facility did not have light rail or even trolley there at the time. So there was no physical connection from the transit center up to what would be the platform at CTC. If you skip over 2 more slides, Brandon, you can see today with the Blue Line, the Spectrum Center, we had to retrofit the Charlotte Transportation Center in order to facilitate that connection to the Lynx Blue Line platform. And so now we are, really at the precipice of a unique opportunity to think about this in kind of a 3-level approach with the Blue Line, the Gold Line, potentially, as we'll come to in future conversations, as we're talking about interlining the Silver Line on potentially Trade Street and the Blue Line, bringing that corridor there. We're doing an evaluation of that. We'll come to you in the future meeting to discuss that. And then you'll have the bus facility. So as we're thinking through this planning, how we integrate not only with the mixed use development, but how do we integrate all those different modes that maybe was not done at the time with the first facility. We have a really unique opportunity to do that now. Next slide. And I've touched on this a bit, but certainly mobility needs and expectations have frankly just changed. I mean, people expect things to be more on demand. They need to see where and when their transit services are coming. We've had some great experience with the app, and we're continuing to improve that. But really, to attract and retain ridership, transit agencies must increase convenience, reliability, and frequency of services. And for us to fully implement Envision My Ride 2030 plan, we need a new hub that helps with all those types of needs. And Mr. Lewis touched on this a bit, but to develop this modern transit hub, which we have identified as a capital need, we have to find a temporary transit center location. We do need to improve the passenger experience. And I want to be really clear what that means. Today we have a facility that is covered, but it is essentially open air. I mean, you are there with the elements. If it's hot outside, you're hot in the transit center. If it's cold outside, you're cold in the transit center, because all the air flows through there. But also it's accessible to any vehicle that wants to go through, even though they're not supposed to drive through there. People who are at the transit center, Jessica's probably seen cars think they can drive through there. But also people that aren't there to ride transit do go through the transit facility. So one thing that we want to make sure with this new design is that you need a ticket to be in the transit facility for the purpose of using the facility, but so does everybody else around you. And so that's something we want to be very clear as we go through the design of this, and that's the kind of feedback you need. But also, with the development of the center, we can start moving towards the Envision My Ride goal of having transfer outside of Uptown Charlotte, having a more decentralized bus network. And that's where I think you all, more than any other committee that we talk to, you all are transit users. You all ride the local service. You do this every day. So you can help us kind of think through some of the things to really improve that passenger experience. Next slide. To just kind of put some color to what, John said about, the temporary transit center for the DNC, Democratic National Convention in 2012, we had to find a new location to relocate services during the convention. There were a lot more parking lots in Uptown Charlotte in 2012 than there are today. And what's on the slide there is show where we identified a temporary location near Mint and 3rd Street. If you go to the next slide, you can see what, click again. Go back to the thanks, Brandon. That location there identified on the screen is where we relocated. You can see they're beginning to work on the MLK park. The Vermeer Bearden Park. That kind of white building there in the center of the screen was where the presidential experience was during the DNC. There was like an activity place. So this is actually right during the DNC preparation time period. If you click to the next slide, you can see that entire area completely developed in less than a year. So, I mean, the time frame is going very fast for development in Uptown. And on the next slide, you can see what we look like today. So finding property that you can relocate a transit center for a couple of years while you're redeveloping the transit center site is nearly impossible in Uptown Charlotte. And that really came to bear with the RNC that Mr. Lewis detailed. Next slide. And so with that, I don't go into this too much detail, but just kind of sum up that we went through unsolicited proposal to us. We went through a procurement process and selected White Point Partners and Dark Interest to begin this conversation about an integrated mixed use facility with a transit center. Next slide. And then just to detail what made this proposal so enticing for us was that they did own property directly across from 4th Street from the transit center. So having that there, securing a site or where we can put a temporary operation zone is very critical to us being able to deliver a new modern transit hub. Next slide. A couple image here, just to count with that cross section. And this kind of goes back to what I mentioned, that 3-level approach here. With this redevelopment opportunity, we really get to think through, like, how do we integrate CityLink's Gold Line, maybe potentially Silver Line on Trade Street with this facility? How do we really fully integrate Blue Line with a mixed-use development that has pedestrian access from the development to the platform, but also pedestrian access to the bus facility? Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, integrated transit center with mixed-use development will require that temporary transit center during construction. One thing that we wanted to, seek opportunities to get more funding participation with this effort. Next slide. That we did submit a RAISE grant in 2021. We were successful in that and were awarded $15 million towards the public-private development. So we do have federal interest in this property, very similar to the Charlotte Gateway Station redevelopment. That's at Trade and Graham, where this is really, they will work in tandem with that facility. That's part of our planning that we'll do as well. Next slide. So as I've mentioned a couple of times, that this transit hub is really consistent with our 2030 plan and Envision My Ride. And on the next couple of slides to show what that really means. Our current local deferred alternative for the Silver Line runs around 11th Street. The center transit center is currently right in the middle of the Blue Line. Think about this hub as one of 26 stations up and down the line. And we have transit facilities at each of many of our Blue Line stations, none at the Gold Line stations because we're mostly walk up. But this facility is really just a hub of transit activity, just like some of the other facilities, and start thinking about it not as only just being in Uptown, but also as a hub for transit activity for that station. And there's conversation with Silver Line that I mentioned that will be coming back with you all in the near future to talk about interlining potentially on Gold Line and on the Blue Line. So that would even further the need for careful coordination with those projects. Next slide. The Envision My Ride effort that was adopted just in May of this year that we've come to many times to talk through about high frequency networks with mobility hubs that provide connections to on-demand services is really our vision for really creating a modern transit facility and hubs and services throughout our community. And I think what's key to that is providing opportunities for transfer outside of downtown, so that not everybody needs to come to downtown. So as we think about our needs for a transit facility, having a facility of 22 bays may not be as completely necessary if we can facilitate those transfers outside of Uptown. So as we look through some of the designs and concepts for the new transit center, we will likely have less bays than we have today. But we think, as we look at the next slide, we really have great opportunity to think through hubs throughout the community. Think about all the park and rides that we have up and down the blue line, those existing hubs there going north, east, and south in our community. And then we have 3 community transit centers at Eastland, South Park, at Beatty's Ford Road, at Rosa Parks. And we have 5 park and rides that we've constructed throughout our community. And then we've also identified through Envision My Ride places like, the Charlotte Gateway Center, at Freedom and Ashley, at the Valley Woodard Center. There's other places that we've identified as hubs that could facilitate transfer. So what that will require us to do is to look at our route network and really meet the needs of a community, not of 467,000 from 1995, but really a 1.1 million group of individuals across a region. And how do we better serve that for a more dispersed, decentralized network? So next steps is to continue this public engagement with you all. We'll be in front of Charlotte City Council later this month. And then we'll be beginning some of our public outreach in October, and to talk about what we'd like to see in a new and revamped transit center. We'll have to do a service equity analysis with this facility, make sure that it is being a fair and planned and equitable manner. And of course, we'll have to coordinate with FTA with this. And that's all the slides that I had today, but I did want to just open it up for a conversation with you all. We'll be bringing this back to you all likely in October to address some of the questions you may have today, but really want to have an open conversation about, what do we think about, the current facility, how that could be improved? What would you like to see in a new facility? What are the questions that we should be asking the public? There's lots of variables in this, and clearly just kind of in closing, if you think about what we started out as an agency back with the 2025 Transit and Land Use Plan, that an integrated transit facility within a mixed use development is completely consistent with kind of our foundational document and integrating with land use. So I'll open that up with questions, dialogue, comments, and happy to answer those questions.
One suggestion or something to consider, and I know part of this is partially because of the fact that the CTC is as it in its current way is currently retrofitted, is that having basically better wayfinding stuff, because obviously you have connections within bus to, let's say, the blue, bus to the gold, potentially interlining with silver, gold, and things like that. So I think this will be a great opportunity to be able to make it kind of an easy use when it comes to transfers, because even though we would like to be less hub and spoke, we're still going to have some of your transfers. So I think that making sure that we really get the transfer experience right, because if the transfer experience is not seamless, then people are going to be less likely to want to be able to use either one of our CATS vehicles, because they if it involves a transfer, because of the fact that they might find the transfer process to be as some people may say, a pain in the ass. So.
Yeah. No, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I was really intrigued by that, some of those historical slides that show the transit center. When this transit center was built, it really was state of the art. Several chapters ago in my career, when I was the CEO in Richmond, and we were considering Richmond, Virginia, we were considering building a downtown transit center. I brought my board of directors to Charlotte so that they could see what a real transit center looks like. But at that point, it was just a bus only facility. So really the thought of the customer experience was, bus pulls in, you get off one bus, how do you get to your next bus? But now it's not just about going from bus to bus. It could be from bus to Gold Line. How do we get there from bus to Blue Line? And some point in the near future, Blue Line, Silver Line, Gold Line. The customer experience has really got to be central to the design of this, not just where we park vehicles, but how do we get between modes? And you used a really important term. It's got to seem like it is intuitive and seamless to the customer. Moving from between 3 different levels isn't going to be I just get off one bus and magically appear at the front door of the train, but it's got to be easy. And so how we design this center is really going to be focused on the customer experience in that. And as we grow, we've got to continue not just what it is today, but what will that experience be like 5-10 years from now when we continue to bring other modes into the picture. So that will be central to the conversation.
I'd like to add, for the,
Sure, can you turn on your, can you turn on mic, please?
The locating the bays in this CTC center is very hard. You have the black boxes, but you have Braille on there, and a lot of people don't use Braille. The low vision or vision blind. So I hope you will focus in on that. So when I do come into town, I'll be able to find the bay, my bus, because it is very difficult and it is very dark and dingy. You also have, I know it's going to be all rehabbed and everything, but I hope you will focus in on some of the, ADA things for people with wheelchairs and vision loss and other disabilities.
Absolutely. And
Oh, I think we've lost the audio.
so sorry, Chrissy, can you guys hear me better
Yeah, I
now?
can hear you now. Yeah,
So
thanks.
I was just saying a lot has changed in the ADA space since 1995. And so we want to make sure it's accessible to all ages and abilities for sure. But yeah, that'll be certainly a part of the design process for real.
Two very basic questions. One, I can understand the appeal of the project and having the temporary location right across the street. Understanding there'll be a lot of construction in the area. Thought about impacts to that, or imagine with traffic patterns and such, so something to, I'm sure it's already been considered, just to comment on that piece. And then two, have we gotten to the point where we're looking at inspiration from other projects that have been successfully completed? So like top of my mind, I'm thinking like the Oculus in New York City. New York City a little bit different, right? But it's become a shopping hub, it's become a social hub, it's got the path coming in from New Jersey, it's got the subways from New York City, all coming into a central location. They've got buses on the outside. So talk about omni transportation situation, like good experience there, or like across Europe, right? They've been doing this kind of transportation model for, like, I don't want to say centuries, but like they've been around for quite some time,
Right.
right? And like they've got it down to a science. So, surely as we go through this, just thinking like, what are our inspiration pieces? Where are we drawing from? But we don't have to recreate the wheels.
I think you've outlined, several examples of systems and cities who have built very successful transit centers. Yes, the Oculus in New York, the center in Denver. We've looked in Europe and Asia. It's all about how if you design with the end in mind, and the end has got to be a very welcoming, mixed use, transit oriented development that has very high standards on customer experience in that. And I think if with that as our end game, I think in being able to see the successes across the world in that, I think we will do very well on this.
Are there any comments on the phone? I know I had sort of a thought. I know that there's folks that that don't think we need a hub. There's that guy that always gives public comment at MTC meetings. He's really against the hub. I assume, I trust you guys enough that if you think we need a hub, we need a hub. But I guess what I was sort of thinking about from that was, I know like the thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, but then when Gateway becomes more when it opens, there may be some buses that's their terminus instead of CTC. And I've sort of experienced myself, like as Uptown Charlotte grows at the edges, getting dropped off in the middle can be a problem if you work at the edge. Like, for example, I take another bus in the summer from CTC to my work because it's just too far to walk in the summer. I'll get all hot and sweaty. And as Charlotte continues to grow from the center out towards the edges, like it gets farther and farther where like getting dropped off at CTC is not going to work, but not a lot of people want to transfer. So having multiple endpoints of buses in Uptown might like start to address that. So I guess maybe I just wanted to raise that, not as like not saying I'm against a hub, but it does kind of continue the central spoke or the central hub problem.
Yeah, I think what we really have such a great opportunity to do here is, think about when that facility was built. It truly was, you came in, you got off, stopped, transferred, went somewhere else out. What we really have now with the 2030 plan coming to fruition, the Envision My Ride effort with hubs outside of Uptown to facilitate transfer. We also have an opportunity to kind of rethink like our network, so do all routes need to stop and transfer in Uptown? Some routes can go through Uptown. Maybe some routes can pass the transit center, but end at Charlotte Gateway Station. We now have the Gold Line. As that frequency improves, that becomes that key connection between CTC and the transit center and the Gateway Center. And if we're thinking about interlining Silver Line in different locations through Uptown, that also could improve that frequency along Trade Street as a corridor comes from the west. So I think that's the kind of feedback we need to see. Does the travel needs really meet the need of coming Uptown and transfer? Because you may need to go from one side of Uptown to the other. And I think that's where that through routing can help, and in developing a Vision My Ride so that you're improving that network and frequency throughout town. Good point.
Chrissy, if I could add to that, I think we are used to, and even as staff, we continue to refer to this as the transit center, as if it was the only one. Really, this is a mobility hub that is no different, albeit bigger, than our transfers at 36th Street or our transfers at East-West station. There are multiple transfer opportunities all throughout our network. This just happens to be one that may have 12 bays and 12 buses. Gateway may have 4, 5, or 6 in that. We still continue to try and decentralize our system. But as Jason mentioned, Uptown Charlotte is still the center of the universe and within our region, with over 100,000 jobs here. This is where most people, not all, but this is where most people want to be at some point in their trip. So we have to design with that in mind. This is not the only center, but it will be still probably be the biggest. And we have to continue to force, educate, cajole, kick ourselves to refer to this as it's just another one of our mobility hubs.
Is there another comment?
I think something I also want to bring up in negative. No, I'm not. Now, obviously, there wouldn't be a plan for this portion yet, but it's more something to just think about is that obviously, eventually, I know it's gonna take a long time, but eventually the whole epicenter is gonna at some point get redeveloped into something. So one of the things I would suggest is more thinking about kind of the flexibility in terms of thinking about that is something that is going to be very close to this new hub. Be able to think about how to integrate whatever is going to be the lifeline, whether it be a newly rehab epicenter or like an office tower or something, but basically making sure that it's integrated kind of well, kind of like how you have like the Hilton Wells Fargo building, like the convention center, making sure that because it's so close, it's going to be still very close to this new mobility hub, making sure that it has a good integration. But obviously, I know that there's not going to be explicit plans now or even the next few months, but just making sure that that is kind of in your As minds whenever someone does eventually figure something out with the epicenter.
Yes. And this is really key to our conversation and thought process, is really getting the beginning of the conversation of what is it that we need in the new facility as we're designing it. Obviously, customer experience has been outlined. The overall experience of the facility, how we connect between lines, the seamless connection. How do we, even down to the details of how do we connect to whatever the new epicenter will be? All of that are kind of things that we have to list out to make sure as we're embarking, continue to hone into our design details, that we check each one of those boxes.
Are there any other comments? I had one last small comment. Just I know that I've heard from some people that they don't like the idea of the CTC, the bus area, at least being underground. I will say, like, as a regular rider, having something that is climate controlled, like Jason mentioned, and also with no smoking, would be amazing. So having like that fare enforcement only zone would be a huge improvement, I think, for every bus rider. So assuming that it's well lit and clean, I don't see a problem with it being underground necessarily. That's just my opinion.
And I think, Chris, we also have to realize that, while we're talking about it now, this is 3, 4, 5, 6 years, down the line before it's in operation. The vast majority of our fleet will be electric by then. And so we have to think not about how we operate today, but how we will operate into the future. Not all of our fleet, but looking at our capital program, 2/3 of it will be by that time. So we can definitely say, look, there are not going to be any smoking diesel fumes in this facility whatsoever.
Oh, I meant cigarettes, by the way.
Oh, I know.
That too.
I know
That too, though.
that too. We checked that box also.
Yeah. And it's, I noticed, at South Park, I sort of thought, I wonder if it'll be maybe sort of like that, like where it's technically underground, but it's not a basement. It's still kind of sort of open air. I kind of pictured that, but I don't know. I think it sounds like it would be more closed in, what you're envisioning, but I don't think South Park is all that terrible. So the people that don't like the underground, I don't know what they think of South Park. Anyway, I don't know if there's any other comments or before we move on to our next agenda item. All right, thank you. I'm sure we'll continue to hear more in the coming months and years. All right, our next agenda item, Jason has got the mic again to talk about the service changes that went into effect and microtransit.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee. This was a presentation that we gave to MTC at the last meeting with some updates since then. So as we've been in front of you a couple times talking through this, unprecedented labor shortages that we're experiencing. I think every industry that has a public service is struggling, period. From school bus drivers to transit agencies across the country, this is a real struggle, and we're certainly are no stranger to that. But we came up with a plan and have to report that we had some very positive results from our August 15th change. Next slide. Just to kind of go back about some of the timeline of how we got here. In June, we kind of highlighted those issues I just mentioned. We developed a methodology to look at all of our routes and see where we could modify service that would have the least amount of impact as possible on ridership. We brought that to you all in July, and you all approved that approach. And then we took those ideas and services to the MTC, where they approved us making those modifications on August 15th. Next slide. And we did a lot of public outreach in a very short amount of time. I think this might have been the most outreach we did in a very confined period. We talked to a lot of people. Everybody was up very early in the morning at the Park and Rides to discuss some of the changes that we did to the express routes in the northern communities. We did a lot of pop-up meetings at the transit center and held a couple of virtual public meetings as well. Next slide. And then I'll also mention that we were at the transit center all day to communicate those changes as well as the Park and Rides. But as you can see there by the numbers, and that very kind of just within those 3 days in early August, we talked to a lot of different people, well over 500 people during that time period to really communicate this change. Next slide. So as we look to do that service change update, this is really only 20% of our local and express routes. 80% of our routes we did not touch. They remain the same. We are continuing to evaluate the ridership impacts to there. And as that operator availability improves through our ridership based approach, we'll look to add frequency back to some of the routes that we adjusted. And then just, on the first day, on that August 15th change, out of nearly 3,000 trips, we only missed 44. And then, compare that to past Mondays where we range anywhere from 300 to 500 missed trips. So a substantial change to that ridership, to the missed trips issues. And then in that week there, you can see there where we still were in single digits in the missed trip category. And on the next slide, just kind of give a highlight of what that looks like throughout, because we didn't just look at that first week and just figure everything was okay. We're looking at this each and every day to see how we're doing. And you can see on the slide there just a substantial reduction of missed trips each and every day. And just the last week, August 29th through September 2nd, out of the course of the week, mostly 0 missed trips. On Wednesday, only 2. Now weekends, Saturdays, we tend to miss more in general, but still, even at 95, far below the pre-change at 790 missed trips. So substantial difference in missed trips. We're tracking this. And we do think, one thing that we wanted to really address in this change was reliability and ridership. And I'm a firm believer that if we can improve reliability, then we will improve ridership, even if service levels have to be reduced. And so we think that we're taking the right approach with that. And on that ridership and reliability, we do have a couple of slides. This is, we're valuing this very kind of quickly. This is some of the early analysis. We'll continue to bring this to you. But on the next slide, there are a couple of routes that we changed. Route 5 and 16. We adjusted those from 15 minutes to 20 and 30 minutes. And, although we're not seeing, too much increase in loads, but we aren't seeing too many loads that are over 40 or even over 30. And so we think that even though we spread out that frequency, we're still able to capture the ridership. And then based upon our APC ridership, which is the automatic passenger counting, that's what collects ridership when people get on and off the bus. We start seeing still consistent small improvements on ridership, but we haven't seen too much of a detrimental impact of ridership at this point. It's still early, still got a lot to evaluate. 8 and 34 were other routes that we went from. They were 20 minutes. We're now at 30 minutes. We haven't seen any noticeable change to impact as far as loads, so we're still able to carry the people that we carried before. Now, maybe what this is showing us that if we were missing trips on these routes, on the next slide, that's where I think you can really see that difference. It's a lot of lines on this map here, but orange means over 20, red means over 30 average boardings on each of those trips and each every day. You can see that that's kind of spread out now, particularly in the morning peak. On the right-hand side is August, and on the left-hand side is May. So after the change, we're seeing not as many high peaks in the mornings of Route 9. And so what we think may be happening there, if we were missing trips earlier, in the day, that people were having to take the next bus as it came along. But now we're able to, more effectively, not miss trips and then carry that ridership. But clearly what we saw is around that 3 and 4 o'clock time period where we saw the need for still 10-minute frequency, where we kept at 10-minute frequency. We didn't take it back to 15 like the rest of the day, that we still are seeing that that's still a need in the service levels. You can see that's still where we're having our greatest ridership. So we still, still early analysis. We'll keep looking at it, bring that back to you. But we do feel that the changes we met did meet the ridership that we have, and we still are seeing some positive experiences from not missing trips. And so just very quickly, we talked to you a lot about microtransit. We shared this with the MTC at the last meeting. And next slide, that, you know, part of that overall vision for improved transit service of high frequency routes, connecting mobility hubs with on-demand services is where we want to go. That vision was adopted by MTC in May of 2022. You know, and as a strategy to help with this operator availability, we want to fast track and get on the ground some opportunities for first last mile connections through ride sharing companies, but also a look ahead of converting some of our 60-minute routes to more on-demand, more mobile and nimble services. So we are working very quickly with that to set the stage for that. Next slide. And to help with that, we did receive some funding this summer that we'll be developing a scope of work for through the FTA's route restoration program to fully flesh out like what would it take to do on demand for the majority of our 60-minute routes. That's really the phase 3 of the phase 1 and 2 that I'll talk about in just a minute. Next slide. Phase 1 of that would be to take the zones that we have that were adopted as a part of the Envision My Ride effort, take a handful of those as early implementation. And so primarily, you know, areas around Camp North End, Hidden Valley, University area, around South Boulevard and 485 and the airport area, looked at those 5 zones as early implementation for first last mile coordination with ride sharing communities, ride sharing companies. And what that would essentially mean in our app, when we activate those for individual zones, that you would be able to, as part of your trip planning, connect with a ride sharing company to take you from, say, a blue line station to some point within the zone, and some point within the zone back to the blue line station. And those points within the zone would need to be more than likely like a bus stop, someplace that we could make sure there's ADA accessible. So we're still working through the details of that, and we'll be working, you know, coming back to you all about which of the zones we want to, you know, start that with that first. That's the map on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you know, if we're at a moment where, let's say, I think the example that Chrissy brought up at MTC, Route 17, like we have an operator shortage on that route on that day. It's a 45-minute route. If we have to cancel and miss, you know, 1 or 2 trips on that, and that becomes an hour-and-a-half route frequency, we can activate a zone that is 1/2 mile from that route so that somebody can complete their trip on a ride sharing company. So that's something that we will be developing kind of rules of the road for that as well, and what it means to have like a severe impact. And is it a 45-minute route that goes to an hour-and-a-half? Is it a 30-minute route that goes to a 60-minute route if there's a cancellation? Those are some of the details that we will bring into you over the coming months. But we are, as a goal, working through some of our contracting and budgeting, working very closely with Rachel and her team. She's been instrumental in making sure this happens within our existing app, and we'll be rolling that out later this year. And phase 2 of the microtransit pilot would be to look to some of our 60-minute routes. What really comes to mind is our Village Rider route, 97, 98, and 99, that already operate at a 3/4 mile deviation in the towns of Huntersville, Cornelius, and Davison, and also the north end of Charlotte near North Lake Mall. Looking to those routes to come up with a plan to fully convert them to on-demand services and have them operated by a third-party contractor. Essentially what that means, smaller buses on demand, smaller vehicles, could be even a van. Because today we operate in some instances 40-foot buses in there, and we feel that's just not the right level of resource for a service that's carrying, you know, somewhere between 3 to 7 passengers per hour. We can come with a more nimble, more reliable service for that community that's on demand, all also coordinated through the app. And the goal would be to use what we learned to the public outreach that will start this fall, and with an implementation at some point in 2023, use that phase 3 approach to the route restoration funds to come up with a strategy and plan for the rest of our 60-minute routes throughout our network. We'll also need to do a service and fare equity analysis that will be a part of that fall 2022 public outreach. So this fall, we'll start that coordination and communication with the northern towns. So at the end of the day, just kind of click and go through these. There's a couple of slides that really what we're trying to do is just create a connected network that brings all these things together. And this goes back even to the Charlotte Transportation Center redevelopment. Frequent transit that serves mobility hubs, that provides connections to on-demand services, and also micro-mobility of the future and today, bike, scooter, and pedestrian connections. And of course, we'll be bringing this back to you guys in multiple times as we go throughout, as we kind of fully flesh out that public engagement plan. And when we have more detail on when the actual rollout would be. So happy to open that up for any questions.
Who's got questions for Jason?
So one question I had, so think about the map, so I guess one area I didn't see a lot of coverage as much with is parts of East Charlotte, which has been historically underinvested. Has there been talks about really some form of micro transit or sort of connection within parts of East Charlotte, given the fact that oftentimes a lot of parts of East Charlotte can be skipped quite often when it comes to either development plans, growth plans, or when it comes to transit plans.
So are you thinking about areas like Albemarle Road, say past Lawyers Road, Hickory Grove area, Pence Road, that kind of part of East Charlotte, not Central Avenue, which has, okay.
Obviously you have the number now, like that part is pretty, hold on, obviously when you get past like the number 9 route, you have that part of Albemarle Road, you have parts like Pence Road, Harrisburg Road.
Sure, okay, good point. So Brandon, if you wouldn't mind bringing back up the presentation, we can go back to the vision slide that MTC adopted. And so we certainly recognize that we're not going to be able to serve our go one more, yeah, that one. And so, you know, what's not shown on this map are some of the new routes that we have considered. There are a couple of opportunities for routes along Hickory Grove, but I think, you know, some of those routes were developed before we even started thinking about like microtransit and on demand. And so I think what we would look to in those areas is, you know, potentially lower density, but high need potentially is looking at more on demand, finding a place for a hub, coordinating with ride sharing communities, you know, trying to match the service with the demand and frankly, you know, the density and looking at that. So I think that's what we're thinking about in the Far East area. I think it's been discussed. And on the map here, you can see some of those zones identified. If you look at Central Avenue and go out to, I don't know if you can see very well, but on the right-hand side of the map where it says Route 46 that goes up Harrisburg Road, there is kind of a micro transit zone identified on that map. So we have, you know, this is a living, breathing document that we'll continue to bring to you all an update, but we have certainly recognized that need in that part of the community.
Are there other questions for Jason? Anyone on the line that had a question? I have a question. So I noticed that since you presented this to MTC, the airport was added on there for the microtransit pilot areas. That wasn't, I didn't see that in the MTC version. So I was curious, well, I mean, you added it, but if you could maybe describe like how you see that working.
Yeah, I'll have to check. I believe it was on the MTC presentation. If it wasn't, we'll you know, go back and
I might have had an old version.
But I think that's an area where we have a route called 235 that really serves almost like a circulator between essentially Freedom Drive, Wilkinson Boulevard, and West Boulevard. And so we see that route as a real opportunity for a future conversion. That's really where that route kind of idea came from. And so the thought would be that, you know, we would need to identify a hub or a location that could be a hub within that area. We've been looking at the Valley Woodard Center, the county facility. We already have a shelter that's within the Walmart parking lot there off of Wilkinson. And then we have the West Boulevard Library area as potential. That's where we have some sheltered stops. And so we're still working through some of the details with that. Out of those 5 zones, I think that one needs a little bit more work, particularly finding an actual place for somebody to pick up a service that connects to a high frequency route. The Blue Line area is a little bit easier in that space, But that was certainly is identified in our work with the West Boulevard Neighborhood Coalition and our work with the county as needing a bit more nimble service out there. But I think a little bit more work that we need to do on that, particularly in identifying a hub location.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none. Thanks,
I have
Jason.
a, Madam Chair, I do have a question. What many of you ride the 9. I think, Joe, you ride the 9, and Jack, sometimes you ride some of the express routes. How has the change? Have you noticed any feedback that you've heard from the community or?
I mean, I can say that I've definitely heard from I've heard about the Blue Line. The people say it's really crowded in the morning. Like one of my coworkers gives me a transit report every day. That's a common complaint from him. I mean, I take the 9 and the 16 in the summer because, like I said, it's too hot for me to walk from CTC to work. So I catch the 16, and having it cut from 15 to 30. I can't take the 16 anymore. I just have to take a scooter because there's like no way to. I haven't been able to sync it up. So it sucks for me. But it's really, I mean, it's a temporary thing. Once it gets cooler, I won't have that problem. But, you know, I'm only going a short distance. For people that go farther down the 16, it just seems like that would be very unfortunate for them. But the 9, I mean, it's a 5-minute difference, right? It's every 15 instead of 10. So I have nothing to complain about there.
I agree. Thank you. So that's good insight, and hopefully you guys feel free to always, communicate back to us these, ideas or things that you're hearing. You don't have to wait to the TSAC meeting to do that. Feel free to tell us that at any point. Thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say personally for me, I would say it is a little bit more predictable, which is a good thing because I don't really like uncertainty quite as much as more personal thing. So there is that I would say downside as far as me personally, there are sometimes where I may need to take I may take the 9 and be able to take I may take the Blue Line before, I would say before, and again, ignoring the missed trips and everything. Before it always seemed like the 9 would sync up decently well with the Blue Line, whereas because of the service changes, it doesn't quite as much. It does result in a longer wait, and I have heard that the same for other people as well. And again, as I mentioned, obviously it's hopefully temporary, but that's more something that I've experienced. Some people have mentioned. So I guess from a connecting standpoint, it just takes more getting used to for a number of people. So
Great. Thank you. That's helpful. All right. Thank you.
Any other feedback from anyone?
And I would just remind when we do speak, make sure we hit the mic. People on the online may not be able to hear. Yeah. All right. And state your name. Yeah. Okay.
Great, thanks. Not hearing any more feedback from anyone before we move on to our next item. All right. Thanks, Jason. Let's see. Our next agenda item, I believe we have Jessica Lanier to talk about CAT's customer service response process.
Yes, good evening. Again, my name is Jessica Lanier. I manage the customer service department for CATS. I was asked to come in today just to give you guys an overview of how the customer concern process works with CATS. Unfortunately, I don't have a PowerPoint, so hopefully this is clear. And if not, then I don't mind answering questions at the end. Okay, so typically the citizens of Charlotte or surrounding areas or our passengers have multiple ways of submitting their customer concerns. One would be through Emerald, which is operated through Charmac 311. They can contact 311 and those agents there will submit your concern. They'll assign it to the transit and we'll be able to check that on a daily basis to see if there's any complaints or concerns regarding our services. Charmac 311 also has a CLT app, which you can download onto your mobile device and you're able to submit your concern that way as well. We have the email, teltransit@charlottenc.gov, so customers can certainly forward their concern there. We have walk-in forms that are available at the customer service desk at the Charlotte Transportation Center and also at the station manager's desk in the event that our booth is closed. Our CATS Pass app actually has a function inside that you can submit your concern there as well, which also links back to that TranSit email address. So there is a way for us to be able to get that information. Citizens can also write letters. They typically mail them to the Charlotte Mecklenburg Government Center and they are scanned or inter-office over to my group and we're able to input those as well. I think the most common way is to call 336-RIDE, which an agent can take your concern over the phone and document it at that time and then forward it to the appropriate personnel. So, like I stated, if you submit your complaint or concern through the CATS Pass app, through the CLT app, those again link back to that TranSit email address. Emerald, again, through Charmac 311, agents, we check that database every day so that we're able to go in to see if there's anything assigned to us that came in through 311. And also, again, if you're submitting it in writing, we will receive that via email or inter-office mail. So once my staff receives your concern through any of those channels, we document that information in a system called CityWorks. In CityWorks, we're able to notate the date, the time of the incident, the route, the vehicle number it provided, the location of the event, the type of request or concern that it is, and then specifically what the customer is stating occurred or what the request is. Once we have that, we're able to add the customer's information. Typically, we ask for a name, phone number. If the customer allows, we'll get their email or mailing address as well. But we do have oftentimes where customers just want to be anonymous, and that's okay. We'll still document it and forward it appropriately. So once we have all that information, we submit that concern or request to various personnel within CATS. So depending on the concern type, it could go to bus operations, rail operations, facilities, planning, and also to myself, being that I'm the customer service manager. If the citizen provides their email address, which is a good thing, they get an automatic email goes to them letting them know, hey, this is your reference number. I'm thanking them for the information they provided us, and also details that they'll receive a follow-up within 3 to 5 business days. If they're over the phone, if they call the phone, we can give them that reference number at that time as well. So again, our response time is to respond to customers' concern within 3 to 5 business days, but we do have some cases where that time frame doesn't work. So for instance, you have planning, you have facilities requests. So those would take a little longer. So we typically let customers know, hey, the appropriate personnel will respond within 10 to 15 business days, because they do have to go out to investigate the concern of the area in question. You think about it, if it's a new route, Jason's team goes out to make sure that it's a accessible area. If it's something that we can do, if ridership warrants, I'm pretty sure I missed something in how they make that work, but I do understand that there is a process. So we let customers know, you may not get a follow-up within that time frame just for that reason in itself. But once the follow-up has been made, once they've spoken to the customer, they typically let us know in the call center, or let my staff know in the call center, so that we can update that information in CityWorks. Now, there are personnel that have access to CityWorks, such as our bus operations quality control team. They're able to go in and update their records as they resolve them. But there are other departments that they have to actually send that information to my team, and we're able to go in and do so. Before we close out the report, we try to verify if the concern is a valid concern, or if it's still undetermined, completed, or any other code that we have listed, just to let us know, okay, this concern, it actually did occur the way the customer specified. We've investigated it and we're closing it out based on whatever notes they provide. Or, maybe it didn't happen in that particular, way the customer noted it, but we're still looking into it and we'll be sure to keep monitoring those for future reference. Let's see. Also, the responding personnel, they receive daily reminders. So this helps with making sure that we get these items closed out. So it's not that your concern goes, unheard. They get reminders that lets them know, hey, you have a pending report that needs to be addressed, or you have an item that needs to be looked into. And that helps them stay on track with those things. At the end of the month, my specialist and team lead in the call center, they're able to go in and export a report for the prior month. So for example, we just exported the report for August, and that report is reviewed. They go through it to make sure that the information there is properly written grammatically. They go in and make sure that the codes match what the customer has stated. And then we submit that to various persons within CATS so that they can go in and run their reports. Bus operations does a really good job in kind of breaking down that report to get percentages on, late bus concerns or, passing passenger concerns, but they do a really good job of breaking that out so we can see what is the most common report or concern customers are calling in about. Let's see. Yeah, so that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Any questions? I'm pretty sure there are lots.
Jessica, could you tell how many phone calls you guys take in a month?
Oh, I could pull that up for you guys. Honestly, since the pandemic, our call volume has dropped. So we typically, before the pandemic, we would take anywhere from 750 to about 800, 900 calls a day. That's Monday through Friday. The weekends, we would take anywhere from about 200 to about 300, and that's Saturday or Sunday. Now we are actually kind of in that 350, 400 realm, just depending on what's going on in the city. If we have a major event, a Panthers game or something like that, of course, the call volume is a little bit higher, but it has dropped drastically.
It's 350 to 450 are on the weekdays you currently.
Right, Monday through Friday. And then Sundays, honestly, Sundays are really slow. We get about 80 to 90 calls. Saturdays kind of in the 150, 175 range.
Okay.
And what are your hours for call center now?
Mhm.
Have they changed any?
So yes, in 2020, we changed our hours. So currently we're operating from 5:30 a.m. I'm sorry, Monday through Friday, 5:30 a.m. until 8 p.m. And then Saturday and Sunday from 7 to 4. The weekend schedule didn't change. That's always been 7 to 4.
Is there a way for people, because our buses and our light rail run longer than that, is there a way for people to contact CATS?
So they can again go through the app to report a concern. I would suggest the app being your point of communication, because we have a tracking feature there as well. So you're able to locate your bus or get information on your schedule. And also, if you have to submit a complaint or concern, it can be submitted there. If it's a security concern, it's connected to our TSAC app. So you can record anonymously or take pictures and it goes straight to security and they're able to handle things. But as far as a live person to be able to speak with you, unfortunately, no, ma'am.
Thanks. That's one thing a lot of people ask.
Yes, ma'am.
There are other questions for Jessica?
Yeah, I think like with that many calls and that volume coming in, like there's must be some beautiful data available to you and your teams outside of just saying like 60% of the calls have been like service related. Okay, like are you like you must surely have like success stories of like, yes, like we have mined this information. We had a number one issue that we tracked for several months. We were able to diagnose the root cause of what it was, and now it's become like the 10th thing something's on it. Do you have any stories like that you could share with us? Like, what are the big successes that have come out?
Well, most recently it's the manpower issue. For a while there, that was our number one complaint. We would even draft a report just for manpower, and we would get that call over anything else. And since the service change on October 15th, that has changed a lot. So I think this is a success. I would count it as one.
Something
But-
else is that, I'm sorry,
Oh, no,
Jessica.
you're fine.
Is that,
Hey, Pam.
I'm sorry.
Your mic.
Um, one of the things that we do as planners is that when we're planning routes and we're looking at, maybe some issues that we believe that are out there, we call Jessica's group and we can say, Jessica, give me all the complaints that you've had for the last 6 months on Route 3. Or, you know, at a certain time, someone saying that that there's not enough, excuse me, that the bus is crowded from 3 to, at 3 o'clock. Give me all of the complaints that you have between 3 and, I mean, she can get very specific in what we need in order to address issues that we may have or improve our services. Or we can call her and say, give me all the requests for services that you have so that we can help determine where people have sent, where people are saying that they need service and things like that. So it is an awesome tool, and she's right. If we don't respond, it will send reminders because we have to respond to her and say, hey, close this out. Because if you don't close it out, you will continuously get something that said, hey, I'm out here. So it's a very good process. It works for planning. It works for identifying needs. It works for areas of improvement. It's a good process.
It's good. I think my comment circles back to the idea that, I want to encourage you and your group, right? Like, you're not just a receiver of information coming in, right? But you can be a real powerhouse to the organization in kind of helping shift the direction or, like really focusing groups on improving the experience with them. So just want to make sure that, encourage you to continue that broader mindset.
Right, absolutely. We need to record that so I can play it for my folks.
Well, this is being recorded.
I tell them-
It's being streamed live.
I tell them all the time how important their jobs are, honestly. So, we play a big part in, the information we receive, and we're able to share with the other departments just to let them know, hey, like you mentioned, the east side of Charlotte may need this. And a lot of times, we're that first point of contact for them. So absolutely, definitely, I'll make sure they hear that part. They're powerhouses.
Well, one thing I'd like to add too, I mean, we've been, trying to meet more regularly with Jessica's team because it's two-way communication that helps to improve the quality of the service, but also to take their data and put it on a map, kind of spatialize it and have it so we can see it visually to see what's going on, to see if there's like 10 people talking about pass-bys on a bus, maybe there's something wrong with, there's like construction there, or there's like a tree that's in the way. I mean, just kind of really just other things that are layering that are impacting service. So we're trying to get a bit more data-driven approach to her customer service requests.
I geek out a little bit on that part of it, but it's just like second, third, and fourth order consequences that, you get the day to day, right? But then you might have information.
Absolutely.
A little deeper into the story.
So it does look like you definitely answered my question on, have you created a more data-driven approach? Coming as the data professional and also data professor and kind of all of this, making sure that there's definitely data-driven approach. So thank you. So thank you for your answer.
Yeah, and I wanted to sort of piggyback on what Jack said. I think that a lot of people think that if there's no point in calling because cats won't do anything. And I think that I'm so glad we had this presentation today so that we know oh yeah, there's a time frame and you get reminded, and we know these things. I don't know that the general public knows these things, or the riding public. But I know one time I reported to Pamela that the driver passed me by, and you called it a pass by, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. That's a whole thing, and that that can get passed on to the bus driver. And in my case, I think it's because there's trees there, so maybe that's a training issue. Whoever drives this route, you got to look carefully because there's trees, or maybe someday they can cut the trees down. But there's a whole science and operation behind this that I didn't know about until I had a pass by. So I feel there's so many things. Oh, and the other, I almost forgot, I'm curious if you've noticed less people calling to see where their bus is once the real-time app launched, because that would seem like that would answer a lot of questions for people. You know, and it probably wasn't like an overnight thing, but like, I think there's probably so many success stories, and also just explaining, you know, there is a point in calling. Like, if the bus misses you and you call, like, the driver could get trained, or they could see if there's a tree. Like, there is something that can be done. I think a lot of people just don't think anything will happen. And I know, like, 2 MTC meetings ago, I think I made a comment about, like, it would be really cool if your database was public. I mean, obviously without people's names in it, but I'm super curious to know what % of complaints are about missed buses, or driver passed me by, or I wish we had a bench at this shelter. It's really, or like I'm sorry, a shelter at this stop because it's really sunny. Things like that. And Mayor Lyles made the comment that, like, she was hoping that TSAC could do more to sort of see what riders want and, like, get feedback from riders. I don't know that the group of us on TSAC can do that, but CATS customer service, like, that's what you get that information. So it would just be really cool to hear more of that. Like, maybe this could be a Twitter thing you guys do. Like, hey, here's a thing that happens. You should call us and tell us when it happens. So, I don't know. There's so many opportunities to use this data.
Well, I think if Jessica, not to speak for her time, but we could bring her back more frequently, maybe not monthly, but maybe on a quarterly, we can talk about her time. But I think, you know, seeing that and seeing the improvement, because sometimes those are indicators of other things going on. And I think that it would be, I think, helpful to share that.
Right.
So I certainly can do that.
So
And
I would, if I could, I think you're bringing up, Madam Chair, some really interesting feedback on that. I mean, we have, through our customer satisfaction surveys that we do, our interest is to make that information more public, but I had not thought about it being also included in that. I think we'll look at that. The question is, how do we scrub it so that it's meaningful? But if there's an interest in it and we have it, then we ought to do so. And so let us look at that. I'd like to find a way to make it positive and not, they received 35 angry customers today. But if they did, there's a reason why they called. And if we can say, we heard this and we did that, and now it's no longer an issue, I think that's worth that level of communication with our customer. We just got to figure out what's the best vehicle for providing that information. But I think it's a point well taken.
Now, what was it? So kind of add on to this. So I do definitely encourage potentially looking into doing that as far as data coming into CATS customer service. One data point that is existing out there now is specifically 311 reports to those who may call into 311. That data is very much publicly available. Now, obviously, that's everything, including CATS and every other department, but that is something that can be filtered by. And I know that because with my graduate level class that I teach when it comes to data analytics, I actually use that as a case study for kind of studying through we're seeing like where complaints may go to kind of by different departments, so on and so forth. But that's kind of going back to kind of reference to the point where there is some degree of data that is available, is 311 specific. So if it's styled to 311, that data is publicly available as we speak. But I would still encourage to as far as data coming into CATS customer service, because it would definitely be a little bit more rich and not just and a little bit more rich in terms of from a data perspective.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you so much, Jessica. That was really interesting. Obviously, we had a good discussion. I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again sometime, hearing about, I don't know, all the stuff we just talked about. All right, moving along. The chair report. Not a lot of notes from the last MTC meeting, because there were a lot of the same presentations we heard here tonight. But the MTC did vote to approve the placement of the the new South End Light Rail Station. We'd received a presentation on that in TSAC, and they approved the offset version where the in and outbound stations are not directly across from each other. And there will be a pedestrian crossing in the middle. So that was approved. And that the pedestrian crossing is supposed to be built with the first phase of construction, because that was sort of one of the drivers of having an extra station, was to give people a way to cross. That's really all. The other topics were similar reports that we heard here tonight. And I did want to echo what John Lewis mentioned earlier. Sherry, this is your last meeting with us. We're all going to miss you, and you've left some big shoes to fill. So I don't know if you wanted to tell us where you're going, or you're going to, I don't know, move off somewhere.
First, I want to thank all of the CATS bus drivers and all the CATS staff who've helped me be able to be and live here in Charlotte, independent and active.
Oh, I think we lost your volume or your audio. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry about that. Anyway, I just want to thank everybody, at CATS, because I have been able to live very independent here with the buses and with the light rail. And so they've been wonderful. The call center's been amazing. They've helped me, all the bus drivers have helped me find places and everything. So I couldn't ask for better service here in Charlotte. I am relocating to St. Louis, Missouri to be closer to family and friends and also work. Other than that, and I've really enjoyed being on the TSAC committee for quite a while now. And everybody, working with everybody and helping to improve transit here in the Charlotte area. And I look forward to coming back. I will be here a lot. So I look forward to coming back and go right into transit and everything, taking it. So thanks a lot to everyone.
We really appreciate that, Sherry, because your input has been invaluable. But one of the unspoken rules of TSAC members that they help us find a replacement. So if you can help us find a replacement. That would be amazing. But we certainly greatly appreciate your time.
Yeah, I hope you
On
get
the
someone
committee
that
many years. So
is out there. Thanks.
Thank you, Sherry. All right, we'll open it up for service issues.
I will come back. I'm not done yet. Well, first, I know the CTC Center is going to be remodeled and everything. But could we please clean the outside of the black boxes? I'm excited people can go up and just push a button. I can't. I have to touch it, and other people like myself have to touch it, and it is gross. I use it to locate the bays. I mean, most of them I have memorized, but I take buses all over Charlotte, so sometimes I get up there and I can't find that bay for that bus. So I'd love to see that clean. Second thing, and this is something that maybe Jason, you and Pamela can help me understand. There was a music festival at Nota Brewery the other weekend, and they really encouraged people to take the blue light rail up there and also, or take the number 11 bus. Well, with the blue line, the light rail going up that way, the light rail, you do the mapping, the planning, and it would tell you to come to 36th Street and walk. Well, there's a bus that comes from 36th Street and then goes back up, Tryon. But you couldn't get the planning to do that. So I looked on, and of course it's got the schedule for Saturday and Sunday, and there it is. And so I called the call center and they said, yes, it is running on Saturday and Sunday. So I didn't understand why on the planning, it would not map it back up because it had to come back up. Tryon.
on the CATS Pass app, or was this like Google?
Yeah, we tried all of them.
Okay, and it wasn't showing, okay,
Yeah.
all right, we can, could be just a database connection or why, yeah, we can look at that, but it should show that full trip, right?
36th Street, it wouldn't show the bus.
The Route 3 probably.
At
is
Route
what you-
3
yeah.
to go back up to, go to Brew, because they really were pushing, and I talked to other people who were having the same issue, because they just wanted to take the light rail and then, but a lot of people were having to, okay, get to 36th Street because they didn't know, and they were just taking Uber over.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So,
look
and
into that.
that's something of the annual there, so.
Great, thank you. I'm looking at that.
Any other service issues from anyone? Anyone who's on the phone? Or in the room? All right, not a lot of service issues this month. All right, we'll move on to our last agenda item then, Pamela and her operation planning report.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to emphasize that we're still monitoring our services. Just the report that Jason provided in his report on the update from August 15th. So we are continuing that. And we do that because planning still goes on and improvements of our services still go on. So we'll still be planning for future service changes. Jason mentioned micro trends that we'll be doing that as well. There were a couple of questions from the last, there were also a couple of questions from the last meeting that I wanted to be able to answer, and several I'll have to come back. But one of the questions was about the QR codes on the Route 9 and whether or not they fade and whether or not they're durable. So they are actually, and Brandon, if I'm saying this wrong, help me, but they are raised so they will not fade, and they'll be able to, someone will always be able to utilize those services. Also, the question was whether or not the telephone number was available for someone who may not have a smartphone. And the telephone number is available on that same QR code so that they can call the number if someone does not have a smartphone. Another one of the questions was for Jason and I, and we're continuously looking at, and we would be working with our marketing team to come up with a survey so that we can speak more in depth with our express riders who indicated the desire to have some midday trips that they don't work the traditional hours. So we heard them loud and clear when we were out for those days that Jason talked about, and we are going to be looking closer at that. There were some others, but we're still doing some research on those, and I'll bring those back at the next meeting. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, and we had we were able to add a bus stop planner to our group, and Keith came from us. Keith, if you'll introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, I believe you introduced me virtually last week. I couldn't hear. My stepdaughter's in college. Anyway, so yeah, my name's Keith Sorensen. I was a transportation analyst with CDOT for the past seven and a half years before these fine folks took me on at CATS, and it's just a real honor and privilege. I'm very excited to be here and continuing my work in transportation planning in transit in a new realm. So thanks for having me.
We tell Keith he has 3,000 reasons to come to work every single day. A lot of bus stops to work on.
Yeah, lots of them.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, if I could jump in one more time here, I'm gonna ask Rachel to give us a little bit of good news. So.
Thanks for putting me on the spot, John. Right? Did you see my deer in the headlights? So the good news is we have successfully tested the real-time feeds for the blue line in our CATS Pass app. Right now, we're in a training evolution with the Rail Operations Control Center because it's a little bit of a different business model for them to have to enter that data. Once we have them trained, they're comfortable with the new procedures, we'll announce that the Blue Line real-time feeds are going to be live in Cats Pass.
So we will finally have a fully integrated real-time app that has all of our services in that. So it has taken a little bit of time, but we wanted to be methodical in this and we wanted to get it right for every mode. But now we have the last one teed up for turn on. So
And we will
Thank you,
make
Rachel.
it in just less than a year from the start of real-time feeds to getting all the modes in there, except for special transportation, which we do have a plan for that.
Awesome. I think a lot of people are going to be super happy about that. Is it in beta right now? Because somebody told me that that they tracked it on their app, and I was like, oh, that's news to me.
When we practice, sometimes we practice in the real environment.
Okay.
It's
they might
better
have
for testing sometimes to see it in real life. So yeah, sometimes they pop up. You might get lucky and see them.
Gotcha. But it's still in testing for right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. We'll have a real-time party when it happens. All right. Any other last questions, comments, concerns, suggestions for next meeting? Hearing none, do we have a motion to adjourn? Anyone?
So move.
I think that was Linda.
Yes.
Do we have a second to adjourn?
Second.
I don't know who that was, but somebody said, Jack, thank you. All right, hearing no opposition, the meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.